Today on Fear and Greed, Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers opens the way for the Future Fund to be told how to invest. The year's biggest float set to hit the bourse, and meet the crypto tycoon who paid $6.2 million US for a banana. Plus, plenty of markets and bribery allegations against one of the world's richest men. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Friday, the 22nd of November, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Watching your faces, you're going $6.2 million for a banana? That was priceless.
There is context to this. Like, it's not just a banana in a supermarket. There's more to it, but it's a good story.
It's a great story.
We'll get to it a bit later on. Still, it's a lot of money for a piece of fruit. The main story this morning, Sean, Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers has directed the Future Fund to prioritise investments in housing, renewable energy and infrastructure. It's the first time in the 15-year history of the fund that the government has actually mandated how the Future Fund should invest.
Quite a change, Michael. Jim Chalmers issued a first statement of expectations for the independently managed $230 billion fund. Focus on the word independent. Dr. Chalmers said the new investment mandate wouldn't come at the expense of performance. He said he is committed to the fund's independence and commercial focus. Now, the Future Fund was established by the Howard government, 2006. The original idea was to pay for the federal government's employee pensions. They were growing, needed money for that, took money from surpluses that were brought in under the Howard Costello regime, put it into the Future Fund. The new mandate says the Future Fund must consider Australia's national priorities of increasing the supply of residential housing, supporting the energy transition, and delivering improved infrastructure when making investment decisions. When it's putting money into stuff, it has to think about those things. The government said it won't take a dividend from the Future Fund until at least 2033. That means that the money that it would have taken as a dividend could be directed towards housing, renewables and infrastructure. A bit of a furphy. The government has never actually taken a dividend from the Future Fund. The government wants super funds, $4 trillion under management, super funds to invest in nation-building projects like housing, aged care and the energy transition. The problem with super funds is that they are legally obliged to act in members' best financial interests. Where does the Future Fund fit into this? It's a sovereign fund, so it can actually be directed in certain ways, or should it only have best returns at its heart? Future Fund Chair Greg Combet, a former Labor minister, welcomed the new direction yesterday, saying it aligned with the fund's thinking.
Can they have both, Sean? Like, can the government expect the Future Fund to provide strong returns, really strong returns, and also invest in the areas of focus that it's kind of picking out?
I suppose you can do it, but you have to be a bit lucky. Now, former chair Peter Costello only stepped down this year. He doesn't think so. He's previously urged the government to not direct how the money is used. David Murray, the first chair of the Future Fund, he said investment returns will be more vulnerable and everyone loses in an interventionist world. Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor, he said the government wants to raid the country's nest egg to cover for its economic failures. Anytime you put restrictions on investing, it can hurt returns. But sometimes you're prepared to put up with that. So if you invest in a fund that doesn't invest in a tobacco company, for example, or in gaming groups, or there are ESG reasons you want to invest in renewables. So sometimes it's okay to have restrictions on investing because that's what you feel is necessary. It might be worth the effort, and that's what it sounds like the government is saying. The fund itself has a goal of 4 to 5% above inflation. Its 10-year average return is 8.3%. So it's actually done better than its goal. It doesn't have members. It just has the Australian government owns it. So that's what it's got to answer to. So theoretically, it's probably okay. But does this mean that the Australian government, which is actually you and I, the taxpayers, does that mean the returns in the Future Fund will be lower because of this direction?
That's a big story, isn't it?
Massive story. Michael, I am going to put my hand up now because we have the weekend edition in 24 hours. That's my story.
Oh,
Yes.
that was me testing the waters just
Yes.
then, going, that's a big story, isn't it? Just to see
Yeah.
how you react. And if you said, yes, this is the biggest story of the week, I was going to be on that like a.
I got it.
Actually, there's nothing I can say that's G-rated. I would have been all over that one. Anyway, you got it first. Well done to you. Let's see how it goes tomorrow on the weekend edition. Another big one, though, Sean. The year's biggest float, worth $4 billion, is set to list on the ASX on December 12. It'll be a portfolio of data centers.
So this initial public offering, IPO, has been in the offing for quite a while. It's now been fully underwritten by investment banks, therefore it's right to go. It was orchestrated by HMC Capital, which is run by a guy called David DePilla. David is a very well-known investor in the Australian market. Basically, it takes advantage of some really hot themes, so property and data centres, definitely technology, infrastructure. It'll hold 13 assets in Australia and the US, the biggest IPO for the ASX in 2024. In fact, it's the biggest real estate investment trust IPO in several years. The whole property sector has been downtrodden ever since COVID, and this is by far the biggest that's been done in that period. Of course, we do have a bit of a pre-runner to this, though not in the public market. So in September this year, private equity group Blackstone bought AirTrunk. Now, that's the largest data centre group in the region. It's based in North Sydney. That's worth about $24 billion, but it wasn't listed. Anyway, it's fantastic to see an IPO get up just before Christmas on a year, which there's been a bit of activity, but nothing big. Guzman y Gomez, I think, is the biggest otherwise. So it's good to get a big one.
Yeah, certainly is. And just quickly, Sean, in economic news, Westpac has joined National Australia Bank in pushing back its forecast of a rate cut until May.
Chief economist Lucy Ellis, who used to be at the Reserve Bank, said the first cut could be even later than May if inflation doesn't fall in line with the Reserve Bank's forecasts. Ellis and other economists say the wording of the board minutes released this week seemed to count out any chance of a rate cut before May, unless there's an unexpected deterioration in the jobs market. Lucy Ellis does expect the benchmark rate to be cut by 100 basis points, though, by the end of next year. So that suggests once we start going 4.35%, you get a 25 basis point cut in May or a bit afterwards. What she's suggesting is that there'll be a bunch of them.
That's quite a run, isn't it? That's quite a forecast.
It is. I mean, very optimistic, I'd say.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Anyway, Sean, we have a lot still to cover, including the $6 million banana. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Coles boss Leah Weckett has told a competition inquiry that the supermarket group is always looking to beat Woolworths, and the number of major competitors has grown and now includes Amazon.
Ms. Weckett also pushed in-store experiences, saying a few years back when Coles focused only on value, i.e. price, it actually lost market share. The ACCC inquiry heard Coles buys about 15% of fruit and veggies grown in Australia. Woolies buys up about 20%. The two big chains control about 67% of the supermarket market. So they say that supermarket market? I think so. Coles said it monitors Woolies, obviously, Aldi, IGA, Costco, and now Amazon in areas like nappies, washing powder, and snacks. Ms. Weckett said customers had changed behaviour in the past 18 months, trying cheaper brands and house brand items. The ACCC is inquiring into the supermarket sector, including pricing practices of the big supermarkets and their relationships with suppliers.
How about Commonwealth Bank yesterday? Sean, the share price hit another new record of more than $157, but like the market, it did eventually end the session lower.
Yes, so the biggest company on the ASX closed down at 100, or just a touchdown really, $156.23. The S&P ASX 200 actually finished flat, 8,323 points. Overall, the banks were mixed, though Westpac had a good day. The miners were also mixed, though Fortescue Metals had a good day. Plenty of corporate news around. Web Travel Group, which was spun out of Webjet, has been told by its auditor to change its previous financial reporting. As a result, its shares fell 4%. Shares in both Sayona Mining and Piedmont Lithium fell after Sayona did an equity raise. Now, Sayona and Piedmont are merging. They're both lithium companies, so what happens to one hits the other. Lots of shares were down. And a good news update on a story we've been running. The boss of Resolute Mining, Terry Holohan, he was detained in Mali with two other executives. Anyway, the gold miner struck a deal to pay $160 million to the Malian government. Mr. Holohan and the other two execs have reportedly been released.
Oh, that is good news for them and for their families and for the entire company. Just on the topic of markets, Sean, you have an interview coming up after the show with Michael McCarthy from Moomoo.
We do. We've been talking to Michael every Friday for 5 or 6 weeks now, and this wraps it all up about using platforms with AI capabilities it's kind of for all investors. So it's for the retail investor, it's for the new investor, it's for the experienced investor. And broadly, what the Moomoo platform can do. It's a really good wrap up of everything we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's coming up after the show. Definitely worth a listen today. Now, Sean, an attempt by an activist investor to end the dual-class share structure at News Corp has been voted down at the company's annual meeting, ensuring the Murdoch family continues to control the company.
So the Murdochs control about 41% of voting shares, but they actually own far fewer. Starboard Value, the activist investor, had argued that this dual structure had given the Murdochs outsized influence. Of course, it gives them outsized influence. The example they gave was that when Rupert stepped down, he put Lachlan Murdoch in charge as opposed to some other sort of process. That's the example Starboard Value gave. Now, News Corp has always argued that the structure promotes stability and the company has done well under the structure. Anyway, it went to the AGM and didn't get the votes to pass. I suppose when 41% of the votes are the opposition, you're always going to struggle to get it through. Also, just worth a mention, the case in a Nevada probate court. We're waiting on a ruling. This is the one where Rupert Murdoch is trying to change the family trust conditions to give sole control of News Corp to Lachlan upon his death, rather than dividing it among his 4 older children. It's been a closed court, so it probably hasn't got some of the headlines that you might expect. Anyway, we're waiting on a ruling still.
Now, Sean, yesterday we saw one of the most anticipated AGMs of the AGM season, Mineral Resources, holding its annual general meeting. And there was little sympathy for founder and CEO Chris Ellison, who has, of course, been embroiled, great word that, embroiled in an alleged tax avoidance scheme.
So Chair James McClements started off the meeting by saying that Ellison lacked the judgment and integrity the board expected. This is the chair talking about the CEO who is sitting next to him. Mr. McClements said that Mineral Resources have hired Elizabeth Broderick to conduct a report into the company's culture. Those who know Liz Broderick know that this week she was the author of the report which Rio released on its culture. Mr. McClements said Mineral Resources will exit or unwind business deals with parties related to Mr. Ellison. There's also been, in recent weeks, there's been revelations of multiple corporate governance failings at Mineral Resources. Yesterday was Mr. Ellison's first public appearance since the scandal broke. He expressed contrition and said, I quote, "I can't stress enough how much I hate what I've done and a dark cloud in my life that I'll live with forever."
Turning to international news now, Wall Street's largest company, chipmaker NVIDIA, has posted a slightly disappointing quarterly result, mostly because it met expectations, Sean.
Yes, the rise of NVIDIA. If you don't shoot the lights out, well, you're not getting a Guernsey. People are disappointed. That's pretty much what happened. It met expectations, but not more. The outlook statement was maybe slightly disappointing after our share trading pushed the share price down about 3%, though it did improve. Before we leave global markets, well worth mentioning Bitcoin again. New record pushing through $97,000 a unit over the past 24 hours.
I mentioned this one at the top of the show. Indian billionaire Gautam Adani and his nephew Sagar Adani have been indicted in New York over his role in an alleged multi-billion-dollar bribery and fraud scheme.
Authorities claim Adani and 7 other defendants, including Sagar, agreed to pay about $265 million in bribes to Indian government officials to obtain solar energy supply contracts expected to yield about $2 billion of profit over 20 years, according to Reuters. The case involves alleged violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, a US anti-bribery law. According to the indictment, some conspirators privately referred to Gautam Adani as numero uno, or the big man. Now, we haven't heard from Mr. Adani yet, but these are just the allegations. Of course, he's well known in Australia. His company acquired the Carmichael coal mine in central Queensland in 2010. It's been very controversial. It's faced numerous legal and political challenges during its approval process, though it did begin to export coal in 2022. One local company not benefiting from the charges is investment firm GQG Partners. It has a large stake in the Adani Group. Its share price was down 20% yesterday.
It's banana time, Sean.
Whew. Been waiting for it.
Let's talk about this. A crypto entrepreneur has paid $6.2 million for a banana taped to a wall at an art auction in New York. More than 4 times its pre-sale estimate. It wasn't just a piece of fruit. It was art, Sean.
It certainly was art, Michael. The gentleman's name, Justin Son, Chinese founder of crypto platform Tron, Tron. He bought the banana, which was stuck to a wall with duct tape. The pre-sale estimate was up to $1.5 million, according to the Financial Times. Sun said the piece, known as Comedian, not wrong, is, I've got to quote this. He said, "It's not just an artwork, it represents a cultural phenomenon that bridges the worlds of art, memes, and the cryptocurrency community." But what I like most of all, Michael, he then went on to add that he plans to eat the banana in the coming days as part of this unique artistic experience, honouring its place in both art history and popular culture.
And for that, he paid $6.2 million.
For a banana, to eat a banana.
That Woolies hands out free fruit for kids.
He could have popped in.
Usually there's bananas in that basket. And if they're looking particularly ripe, no one's going to ask for your ID to make sure that you are, in fact, a child.
No. It's kind of like the ultimate, the king that wears no clothes. Wasn't that what's that little...
The emperor?
The emperor with no clothes? That's it. The emperor with no clothes.
Yeah.
The idea that you kind of get beyond yourself, that you think you can do this and make a statement. And at the end of the day, you just look like a dickhead.
This is how I like to finish a show, talking about nudity and bananas. Goodness me. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Your guest today is Michael McCarthy from Moo. Definitely worth a listen, and keep an eye on the playlist as well. At around about midday, a new bonus episode of Ask Fear and Greed, where we answer listener questions. If you've got your own questions, send it on through via the website, fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you very much, Michael.
It is Friday, the 22nd of November, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast, and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed.